blah, blah, and there's been no real complaints on it. And I brought up to him and told him, a little history, that like the Barnum decision, if we don't stand up for fairness in little girl sports or big girl sports, a bunch of ridiculous laws emanating from our failure to act now will be passed shortly. And as I explained to Pastor Hill, and forgive me if I sounded arrogant for explaining things to Pastor Hill, but I felt compelled because this is an argument you hear time and time again. Well, it's not really a problem. You guys want to address this because you're bigots or you hate transgender people or something. Boring. Like liberals are the saviors, the moral saviors of us all. They're not. They're just ordinary people, mean-spirited a lot of times. The Democratic Party has become very mean-spirited. Their pursuit of Donald Trump and their arrogance in the Illinois case, gerrymandering case that I explained in the last half hour, and certainly their treatment of a bunch of bozos, and that's what they were, who got into the House of Representatives, got into the nation's capital, and wreaked havoc and stood around and raised hell and made fools of themselves. Some of those guys have been in jail for months. Do you really think they thought that they thought that they were doing something wrong? They weren't even wearing masks. Antifa is smart enough to wear masks. These guys weren't. How do I call them bozos? Any grown man who walks in to the nation's capital with a bare chest and wearing buffalo horns and says he's the shaman is a bozo. No, I don't identify with them. No, I do not think that they're conservatives or traditionalists of my particular brand. I think they're a bunch of poor white people, and they woke up not long ago, just before Trump was elected, and said, the Democrats, under the Democrats, we're always going to be poor. All the promise of the Great Society under Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, all those promises that we first heard about during Johnson's Great Society programs and the great tradition of the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt, they're never coming to fruition. Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are in love with status and money, and they're really Republicans. What do I mean by that? Let me say again, and I know I beat up on the Clintons because they deserve to be beaten up on, and their legacy needs to be thrown in the trash bin of history. Bill Clinton's administration reduced corporate taxes by 40%. NAFTA, that destroyed private trade unions in this country, Clinton never mentioned it while he was campaigning. Why didn't he mention it? Because he's a liar. He remains a liar to this day. I never had sex with that one, and that's the least of his lies. The Monica Lewinsky lie, that's the least of it. Clinton's first act, of course, was gays in the military. That was at the insistence of Hillary, I'm sure. But NAFTA became the centerpiece of his administration, his 2 terms in Iowa, and it was a disaster for working people. NAFTA resulted in a series of tax changes and tax laws that allowed companies to move overseas. As a matter of fact, it favored those moves by companies overseas. They could easily justify it to their shareholders who were saying, what about our people in our country? Oh, don't worry, we'll go right across the border. We'll save all this money, and who are they anyway? That was Bill Clinton's doing. That's what Bill Clinton did for the American working people who once turned to the Democratic Party and their church as the savior and the salvation of all of their loved ones, themselves and all of their loved ones. It was a deep betrayal. It was the deepest betrayal. Along with Catholic priests and clergy protecting pedophiles in their ranks. Yeah, no wonder we voted for Donald Trump. No wonder we voted for Donald Trump. We had 2 terms of George Bush. He got our kids sent to Iraq. Now Biden wants to bring everybody home. These people are, who do they represent? I'll tell you who they represent. Country club liberals, Republicans and Democrats. But back to my conversation with the good Reverend, and he's a good guy. Pastor Hill is a wonderful person and with a deep love of Jesus Christ, and he's devoted his life to the ministry, him and his wife both, and I stand in admiration of them. Let's go back to the Varnum decision, and for a definitive understanding of the Varnum decision, you have to read a short book by Tom Otowski of the Des Moines Register. He used to be a regular columnist of the Des Moines Register. Tom's a liberal, that's okay. And Tom and I had Tom on the air with me a couple of times, and I think I got too conservative for him, so he broke all contact with me. But we used to talk back and forth, not just on the air, but emails, things like that on Facebook. And Tom's book, Equality Under the Law, is a step-by-step process of mainly wealthy gay rights supporters to focus on and target the Iowa Supreme Court as a liberal branch of government, which it certainly was. And they could probably find an argument that they could support that would allow gay marriage in Iowa. Now, at the time, just some northeastern liberal states, I think, had authorized gay marriage. I think Boston had a civil union thing. So it was a big deal for national gay rights leaders to come out here to Iowa and score this vote. Completely overrode the will of the people, completely dismissed the Defense of Marriage Act that passed both houses of our Congress, and it was signed by the governor of our state in 1998. And the Supreme Court came along, and we're allowed to act like none of that mattered. Started with Judge Robert Hanson of Polk County. He ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, who were in support of same-sex marriage. Now, this was in 2009, as I recall, and I'm trying to look it up exactly. But this essentially was the ruling. The court noted that Iowa had a long history of progressive thought on civil rights. Does that mean it's a law? 17 years before the Dred Scott decision, according to our Supreme Court, the Iowa Supreme Court refused to treat a human being as property to enforce a contract for slavery and held out our laws must extend equal protection to persons of all races and conditions. This was the logic, the famous logic that passed the court. Now, more to the point, the Varnum decision gave birth to yet another Iowa Supreme Court decision. And by the way, Lambda Legal were the legal people who argued the case before the Supreme Court. Lambda Legal convinced the Supreme Court of Iowa to order 2-parent birth certificates for a child born to married lesbian couples. That was the first, I suppose. I'm sure that there's couples now that do the same thing. This happened in 2013, but it was a direct result of the Varnum decision. David Wiggins, the madcap of the court, in the decision by the Supreme Court, Justice Wiggins, who of course ruled that same-sex marriage could be allowed in Iowa. Justice Wiggins wrote, by naming the non-birthing spouse on the birth certificate of a married lesbian couple's child, the child is ensured support from that parent, and the parent establishes fundamental legal rights at the moment of birth. Therefore, the only explanation, here's the great line. Therefore, according to Justice Wiggins, the only explanation for not listing the non-birthing lesbian spouse on the birth certificate is stereotype or prejudice, or both. Justice Wiggins and the entire Supreme Court and their supporters had a keen eye for all the lowlifes who argued this wasn't common sense. There was nothing in our laws that would permit this, nothing in our history, nothing in our Constitution. As a matter of fact, the only influence on this particular decision was the Varnum decision. It was precedent. You see how that worked? The same justices who had worked and passed Varnum now came together and said, oh, yes, we have precedent. Hey, we have precedent for this type of thing. So, yeah, we'll just create a lie and force you to believe it. And they have become so powerful. And I warned about this back at that time. Soon, the argument of gay people at the time was we just want to be left alone to enjoy a married life like other people. Now they're demanding things of us, aren't they? Now they're threatening people. How many people have been fired and their lives disrupted because they simply didn't agree with a gay marriage decision? How many? How many? I don't care what you think about gay marriage. Frankly, I don't care what gay people do. Never did. But don't lie to me like this. Don't create these lies and these rationalizations and change the lives of everybody in the state. Oh, what has really happened? What has really happened that causes you such concern about the Varnum decision, Michael? Well, I'll tell you, now we have open and out people normalizing their behavior to school children. There's nothing you and I can do about it. Who cares if we agree or not? Justice Wiggins here says we're full of stereotype and prejudice. What about the people who adopted a child? A heterosexual couple, yes, them. They were okay with naming the actual biological parents. I mean, after a time, it didn't happen right away. But now, certainly, biological parents can be acknowledged or not. Some biological parents don't want to be identified. But to have these lies thrust on us is the same thing that will happen with transgender people. There will be a scorning of anybody who is concerned that their daughter might be wrestling a man. And the man may have them in a real chokehold right before screaming fans. Isn't that nice? Real quickly, you're on the air at AM 1400.
Yeah, hey, really it all started with Roe v. Wade.
Well, you could be right, sir. You could be right.
Because you can't say that it's a baby when you want it, but not a baby when you don't. Either it is or it isn't.
Good point, sir. We're going to have to go. Thanks for calling.
Hi, this is Gary Rima, the voice of the University of Northern Iowa Panthers, and this is the home for Panther Sports, the voice of Fort Dodge, KVFD, Fort Dodge.
The hackers lose. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News. Cyber crooks who got millions by attacking a major U.S. pipeline just lost most of that money.
The Department of Justice has found and recaptured the majority of the ransom Colonial paid to the Dark Side Network in the wake of last month's ransomware attack.
Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco announcing the recovery of cryptocurrency from the Russia-based hacker group, the first operation by a newly created ransomware task force at DOJ. The attack on Colonial led to the shutdown of thousands of miles of pipeline, disrupting part of the U.S. gas supply for days. The FBI and the Biden administration discouraged companies from paying ransom to hackers to avoid encouraging more attacks. Meantime, the White House says ransomware will be a topic at the upcoming G7 summit, and that next week's summit with Russia's president is not a sign of trusting or rewarding him, but a chance to emphasize American expectations and standards. Vice President Kamala Harris visiting Guatemala and sending a message.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. do not come.
Meeting with Guatemala's president, Harris says the U.S. will enforce its laws and discourage illegal immigration. She'll also visit Mexico as part of the administration's effort to address root causes of migration. A new anti-corruption task force, part of the effort to help governments there improve conditions for residents. A new drug for Alzheimer's disease, first to win FDA approval in nearly 2 decades, made by Biogen, meant to address a likely cause, plaque buildup in the brain. Some experts are against the move, though, concerned there's not enough clinical evidence it can work. The drug does not reverse decline. In one study, it slowed the disease. America is listening to Fox News.
This is a metaphor for your business's journey. Sometimes it feels like the world is throwing everything it has at you. And to succeed, you need someone to guide you through. That's what Dell Technologies Advisors do. They have the tech advice to help you navigate whatever challenges you're up against and get you safely to where you want to be. For advice on solutions like XPS 13 laptops powered by Intel Evo platform, call an advisor today at 877-ASK-DELL.
Oh, whale! Guys, whale! Wow, whale. Oh, that's a big whale. Okay. Whale. Oh no, whale!
The tides can turn quick on the water. Progressive's boat insurance has you covered. Get a quote today in as little as 3 minutes at progressive.com.
Well, at least it wasn't a shark, am I right?
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Ahead of his first meeting with the Russian leader, President Biden made a call to Ukraine.
Before a summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin next week, President Biden spoke with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky earlier today.
President Biden was able to tell President Zelensky that he will stand up firmly for Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and its aspirations as we go forward.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also says President Biden invited Zelensky to the White House later this summer. In a tweet, Zelensky thanked President Biden for the invitation. In an interview earlier this week, Zelensky said President Biden should meet with him before the meeting with Putin. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Government scientists reporting another dangerous milestone for Earth. The annual global peak of heat-trapping carbon dioxide in the air is now 50% higher than when the industrial age began. They're also reporting the fastest rate of increase ever. The New Jersey governor draws a line after allegations of misconduct at a women's prison, which may now be shut down for good.
The Edna Mahan facility for women was where, in January, male guards allegedly attacked female prisoners. Governor Phil Murphy said, unfortunately,
that was not the first chapter in the long book of this facility, and I've just made a decision. Enough. We're turning the page.
10 guards face criminal counts. Governor Murphy says, in addition, corrections reforms must happen. He says the closure won't be immediate.
This is a multi-year process. You just can't flip a light switch.
The more than 300 women would have to be sent to other prisons, or a new facility would have to be built to house them.
Fox's Gernal Scott. Amazon's founder will be the first person in the world to ride his own rocket. Jeff Bezos and his brother plan to be on his space company Blue Origin's first manned flight next month. An online charity auction to fill another seat continues. I'm Lisa Brady, Fox News.
Your news, your town, your station. KVFD News when it breaks.
With your KVFD News update, I'm Rob Jones. A teenager from Texas died over the weekend after he drowned at Black Hawk Lake in Sac County. Emergency personnel was called out to the lake shortly after 6 p.m. on Sunday. Eyewitnesses reported that 18-year-old Willis, Texas native Brian Valencia began struggling while swimming there. Reportedly, Valencia went under and did not resurface. Lakeview Fire and Rescue recovered his body after a search of the lake. Valencia was pronounced dead after being taken to the hospital in Sac City. A murder suspect from Webster County will undergo mental evaluation before the proceedings in his murder trial continue. 29-year-old Fort Dodge resident Mark David Russell is accused of killing 45-year-old Angela McLeod at a residence in Fort Dodge in January of 2020. Russell faces a charge of first-degree murder. The police report accuses Russell of beating McLeod to death with a golf club. The trial will be suspended until the judge orders that Russell is able to stand trial, and then the trial will be ordered to resume. The Iowa State Patrol says a pheasant caused a fatal accident in Greene County on Friday. The accident report says 30-year-old Theodore McGinnis of Des Moines was driving on a county road near Jefferson when a pheasant hit his car around 4:30 a.m. on Friday. The investigation shows that McGinnis then ran off the road and overcorrected before ending up in a ditch. The accident was reported around 6:30 Friday morning, and McGinnis was found dead at the scene. The accident report says that McGinnis was wearing a seatbelt. A weekend fire in Laverne ravaged a house and vehicles. The fire occurred Saturday night and multiple fire departments were called out. Laverne Fire Chief Dave McPeak said that the fire started in the back of the house and the house and vehicles were a total loss. The chief says that no injuries were reported and the cause of the fire is still under investigation. For KVFD from the Jerry Sheeter Newsroom, I'm Rob Jones.
Here's the AM 1400 KVFD weatherology forecast. Mainly clear skies and quiet this afternoon with daytime highs approaching 90. Winds out of the south 8 to 15 miles per hour. Mainly clear skies and quiet again. Tonight, lows dip down to about 67. Mainly clear skies. Tomorrow, chance for isolated thunderstorms. Daytime highs approaching 91. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. Currently, it's 88.
With your KVFD Sports Report, I'm Rob Jones. Fort Dodge softball with 2 wins over ranked opponents on Saturday in a 2-game event at West Des Moines. The Dodgers routed defending 4A state champs Winterset 14-2. Fort Dodge would get 7 in the second and 6 in the third to break the game open. Left fielder Chloe Wirtz had 3 hits in the game. 8th grade phenom Mariah Myers, a home run and 5 RBIs. Jalen Adams, the winning pitcher, working 4 innings, striking out 5 while allowing 2 runs. In the second game, the Dodgers beat Johnston 3-1. Fort Dodge would get 2 in the first and 1 in the second. Junior shortstop Tori Bennett with 2 hits. She drove in 1 and had a stolen base. 8th grade pitcher Lucy Porter, the story of game 2. She threw over 5 innings and allowed just 1 run to a ranked Johnston squad. Mariah Myers now has 19 RBIs on the season, which is in the top 10 in the entire state. The Dodgers have now taken 2 out of 3 from Johnston this year. Fort Dodge is back in action tonight for a road doubleheader at Ankeny. St. Edmund softball swept their 2 games at the CYO in Carroll. They blanked St. Albert in game number 1, 3-0. The game was a pitcher's duel as St. Albert managed just 3 hits. The game was scoreless through 3. St. Edmund plated 3 in the 4th, and that was all they would need as neither team would score the rest of the way. The second game featured more offense as the Gales downed Bishop Garrigan 8-5. St. Edmund trailed 1-0 after 2. They plated 3 in the top of the third. Garrigan answered with 2 in the bottom half to tie it at 3. St. Edmund then rallied for 5 in the 5th and allowed just 2 the rest of the way. The Gales are now 4-3 on the season. St. Edmund baseball split a pair of games on Saturday at the CYO. Gales won a thriller 7-6 over Galen Catholic. St. Edmund came from behind after being down 5-3 after the first. Gales got 2 in the second. Galen Catholic added 1 in the 4th. St. Edmund then got 1 in the 5th to tie it at 6. They would score in the top of the 7th and hold the Jays in the bottom half to win it. For St. Edmund, Hayden would fall to Bishop Garrigan in the second game, 17-2. The Golden Bears got 3 in the first, 5 in the second, and 8 in the third. St. Edmund is back in action tonight, hosting Clear Lake. You can hear the game at 7:30 first pitch on your home for Gale Sports, Sunny 99.7 and yourfortdodge.com. And that's your afternoon sports.
R&R Well Company reminds you, always support our veterans.
Are you there, Joe?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Good. Be with you in 20 seconds.
Not a problem.
Experienced experts with state-of-the-art equipment for all well projects. Give them a call at 515-351-0968. R&R Well Company. On the air because they care.
Get control of flies on your swine operation with a comprehensive game plan built around Clarifly Larvicide and Starbar products from Central Life Sciences. Clarifly Larvicide offers feed-through control that prevents the emergence of nuisance flies from the manure of treated animals by as much as 96%. And Starbar features a lineup of baits, traps, and sprays that tackle your fly problem in all areas of your operation. Flies can spread disease, impact your neighbors, and interfere with swine weight gain. Learn how to limit their impact at centralflycontrol.com.
I'm Susan Lee, and this is the Fox Business Report.
Former President Donald Trump agrees with Republican sentiment that President Biden's support for expanded $300 weekly unemployment benefits is hampering American companies'
Michael Devine, the Doctor of Truth.
Does anyone have anything they'd like to confess?
At AM 1400 KVFD.
That's right, and I welcome to the program, and I'm proud to welcome to the program once again. What can I say, Joe? I'd have to fire myself. So, yeah, it gets a little tricky in here pushing all the buttons sometimes. By the way, this is odd. I've been talking with Joe the last couple of years, I think, and I consider him a friend, and I've never met him face to face. So I invite you, now that the COVID thing is pretty much over, to come to the studio anytime you want and be on the air with us.
I am looking forward to doing that, and I am certainly going to take you up on it.
That's terrific. That's terrific. Yes. Monday's usually my religious show. I have a Catholic and a Protestant on. Of course, Joe is not a Protestant. But Joe, you're a deacon in the Catholic Church now. Why didn't you ever become a priest?
Well,
more money in being a lawyer, or what?
No, yeah. Interestingly enough, I thought about it one time. I think I told you I did not go to high school here. I went away to a Jesuit prep school. And at the end of my senior year, I thought long and hard about going into the Jesuits. Turned out I decided that I'd take a year or two in college and see. And while I was in college, that aspect of the vocational life kind of drifted away. My younger brother, Kevin, however, was in the Jesuits for 8 years, leaving right before ordination. So it's something that, quite candidly, has happened in our family. I'm very happy to be a married man with many children and grandchildren, and I honor and respect those who have chosen the life of being a priest, because in this day and age, Mike, it is certainly not an easy job.
It sure isn't. And I know we've had a priest shortage for quite some time. Younger men are not coming into the priesthood as they once did. Father Boehm, it's great to have him here. Father Fellers also. It was great to have Father Boehm here. Father Fellers as well. He's a younger man. Yeah, I guess I'm going, Pastor Hill and I talked a little earlier today about the fact that we used to have 8 Catholic churches in Webster County, and now we have 1. And that's upset a lot of people who went to these other churches for quite a long time, including here in Fort Dodge, of course. My son got married in Corpus Christi. I always considered that a beautiful church, even before they remodeled it. Why do you think there's not many people coming to the church anymore?
Oh boy, Mike, there's so many reasons for that we could spend weeks talking about that. But to suffice it to say that it is a sign of the times in our culture. And not only is it something that is affecting the Catholic Church, but it's affecting all churches. I see the Gallup poll is just out. For the first time in the history of taking it, we are no longer a church nation. We have more people who are avowing that they are non-religious than religious, and non-churchgoers. It's a sign of the times. There are those that would say that the Prince of Darkness seems to be succeeding. It may also be a sign that things are going to happen here in the future that is going to probably scare the devil out of all of us, but who knows?
Well, I used to listen to Paul Harvey a lot. When I first got here almost 13 years ago, Paul Harvey was still with us, and he appeared on this on this radio station. He had a piece, one of his more famous pieces, called "If I Were the Devil," and he went on to describe. Now, he did this many years ago. If I were the devil, he would attack the churches. He would make any sort of lifestyle all right, and make people lose faith. Make people lose faith, and I can't remember it all, of course, because it's about 5 minutes in length. But it's chilling to listen to today because most of the things he described have come true. And he was speaking as if he were the devil. I really can pinpoint a couple of things. People had or at least I did when I was younger, and you probably did too, a very strong faith in the church and a very strong faith in our government. Now, when I was young, and I was in the military, it was discovered that we were still in Vietnam because politicians simply didn't want to be the first president to lose the war. And there was a lot of lying around we were in Vietnam. And this was shortly after Vatican II. Now, Vatican II freaked out a lot of older Catholics, Joe. I don't know about your family, but my mother was completely freaked over the Vatican II changes. And I remember her saying, with a lot of fear and anger in her voice, I don't know what to believe anymore. And for that generation of Catholics, it seems like the church had broke the faith with the congregants. It was a very serious issue. You, of course, remember these things. You were a kid, too, in 1962 and 3.
Absolutely.
But
as a matter of fact, I was a high school student then in my sophomore and junior years. And one of the things that happened at my Jesuit prep school was that we took and analyzed the documents out of the Second Vatican Council and went over them, tried to parse them and went over them in detail to a degree that I didn't see later on until I got into college. But stop and think about just exactly what you're talking about. What did people? Have you ever wondered when you run into people like that? You say to them, "Tell me what it is that you dislike about Vatican II," and then sit down and put your seatbelt on. And one of the things that I think that they are going to say is that they like, in their judgment, the doing away with the discipline of the church.
Yes.
And wow, think about that. So many of them said we didn't like having the Mass in English.
Oh,
so
a lot of people.
What they're really saying was that they preferred to be reading their prayer books. Everybody had a prayer book. They prefer to be reading the translation from the Latin in their prayer book than actually hearing it in their own mother tongue.
Yeah.
That defies logic, in my judgment, because the whole concept of having the Mass in your mother tongue was making you a participant,
of course,
more engaged in it. But of course, people didn't like that. And of course, with Vatican II also happened at the time that you will recall that we have, after John the 23rd, we have Paul VI, and we have the churches. We have the church's encyclicals and the church's position on contraception. And, there's a whole line of thinking that everything started to unravel when the pill came along. Because what happened, and I'm willing to, happily discuss this with anybody. What happened when the pill came along is a whole bunch of social mores went out the window.
Sure.
because there was no, if you will, there was no culpability, and that's a tough and a bad word to use maybe, but there was no responsibility, there was no onus for our actions. We no longer had to take our actions truly into account, and things happened. Yeah, so let me digress with you for just a second on that, if I could, Mike. We got out. Tradition tells us that all of us, Protestant, Catholic, human being, we got out of Eden with two of the gifts. Okay, so we lost infused knowledge, which means that we had the ability to know and understand everything. We lost the ability to, for example, not to die. We lost the ability not to become ill. We lost the ability to move with transcendence or celerity, i.e. the speed of thought. What we got out of Eden with were two things: procreation and free will.
Yes.
All right. So now you stop and you look at those things. What are the two things in the life of humanity that are the most powerful? I would submit sex and, hey, I can do what I want to do. The two very things that we walk out of Eden with. They are the things that we have the ability to do the most good with, and they are the things that we have the ability to do the most damage with. There's a reason why sex sells cars, you know?
Sex sells everything, buddy. Or it used to.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
And when you strip it away and you start to look at it, of course it would, because the sex is one of the two most powerful things that we have as human beings. Why wouldn't it?
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Yes, absolutely. I remember sitting at a table once where there was a woman of my mother's generation and some younger Catholic women. And of course, this particular older Catholic woman had a lot of kids, and the younger women were kind of saying, "Why did you have so many kids for?" And this older woman kind of tried to brush them off, but they wouldn't let up. Finally, she just turned on them and said, "You girls are just lucky you had the pill. You girls are just lucky you had the pill."
And you know, there's a reason why we have that phrase that many a truth is spoken in jest, because when we do have people who kid about a subject, and you will see it, and I see it, and our listeners see it every day, that people are afraid to say what they really think in a serious mode, so they will say it in a jovial or a joking mode, but the truth is what is really there. I can of course hear the lady saying that. And when we stop and we analyze what's happened since the 60s, the decade of the 60s, we see that a whole bunch of quote unquote freedom has come our way. And all of us have trouble dealing with freedom without discipline or freedom without judgment. Those things go hand in hand. And you don't have to be a liberal Democrat, or you don't have to be a conservative Republican to, I believe, to agree with the premise that the obverse side of the coin of freedom is responsibility.
Of course. Of course.
Nobody thinks about that today, because it's not cool, it's not neat, it's not kosher, it's not worth trying to understand. The problem we have with so many things is we no longer have the basis for discussing issues, because nobody takes the opportunity to get informed, to have some type of a jumping off point where we can all agree on something.
Well, there's no more objective truth, Joe. It's all a personal truth, or my truth is this, or my truth is that. Objective truth, to my mind, and what I was taught in Catholic schools, objective truth comes from God Almighty. That is the ultimate truth, God. So when you have the church for a long time talking about purgatory and limbo, and all of a sudden they're gone, and the priests, by the way, handled it very badly, claiming the church never meant to tell us about purgatory and limbo in such a literal sense. That was nonsense. I remember being taught about purgatory and limbo, and they were very real things that were being described. All of a sudden, Pope John the 23rd comes along, Vatican II comes along, and there's no more purgatory and limbo. George Carlin, who was Catholic as a young man, even did a comedy piece about it. He said, "What about what about all those people who are doing eternity for a hot dog, because we got rid of meat on Friday Prohibition as well? And also, what happened to limbo and purgatory? Where did they go? You know?"
Yeah.
And that's still a pertinent question.
Sure.
I'll ask you, Joe. Where did they go? I'll ask you.
Well, two things. Number one is purgatory hasn't gone anywhere.
Okay.
Because when you stop and you try to take a look at this theologically, there has to be a place of where the reparation is made for the sins that we do in this life. Okay, that's kind of a segue into the technical answer. Limbo, on the other hand, has gone. The concept of limbo, like most things, is we're trying to tell people things that help them get a handle on life. Does it seem to you if a baby is born but the baby isn't baptized, that they should be denied the beatific vision and be denied Christ, to be denied God? So the idea was, we have this place called limbo, which is kind of heaven without heaven. Okay, that's that, and I'm sure you understood it that way too.
I did.
It was really heaven, but it was kind of like heaven without being heaven with a capital H.
So this is I have the key question for you. Does that mean limbo or purgatory were real, or were they just a construct of the church?
I think, the short answer to that is, I don't know.
Yeah, no human does, of course, but
the concept of the idea of a church is to give us a framework and a way to get an understanding of how we proceed through this life, and to help us get through this life. And Mike, sometimes mistakes are made.
Oh yeah.
The church is made up of human beings. You and I could sit here for the next 3 weeks and we could talk about the idea of abuse in the church.
Oh yeah.
And when we break it down and we look at 99.999% of priests who gave their lives in a good sense, and we have some really rotten guys who were there. Hey, stop and think about the 12 apostles. Christ had a guy in his group that was nefarious. His name was Judas.
Judas.
I mean, this whole boat that we're all sailing in together, Mike, is subject to flaws and error simply because again, from a theological point of view, the world is out of whack, and it has been since the first sin. We're gonna live with that.
Yes, of course. I don't think that's, and I know what you're saying about not knowing about purgatory or limbo or any of those things, that they were real or not. But it was a tremendous question at the time, and a lot of Catholics were angry about that because they felt they'd been lied to. Now, when you have the church and state lying to you in a short period of time, that's devastating. It was really devastating to me as a very young man. I asked the same question that my mother did. What now should I believe, or what should I believe?
Well, Mike, let's fall back and let's ask some basic questions.
All right.
Okay. Every person that you run into, did your parents lie to you?
Oh yeah, they told me there was a Santa Claus, but I got over it.
Yeah. Did your parents lie to you? That's the question.
Yes.
And the simple answer is going to be hell yes, they did. Well, did you decide that you were going to stop being their child?
No, I didn't.
Of course not. Well, let's jump that up. Has your government been lying to you? Has your government of the United States of America ever lied to you? And I don't care. You pick an administration, and the answer is going to be yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you stop? Did you say, stop the presses? I'm no longer going to be an American. I'm done. That's it. I'm out of here. I'm done. I can't be an American. They lied to me.
I think the difference between church, there is a big difference between church and state, though. But
you know, Mike, the concept here is the same. We hold things to a different standard, and we this whole idea about free will that we talked about coming out of Eden. Boy, when we want to use it one way, it is all our way, but it always will cut against us as well. And that's why I say, you know, I am never going to argue on this program that the church did everything right.
No.
Because clearly enough, we did not. But the fact of the matter is, that is one of the few areas in which we said, hey, my 7th grade priest lied to me. I'm done being a Catholic.
No.
My rabbi lied to me. I'm done being Jewish. Hey,
but
you and I,
you understand then that everything else that comes out of their mouth would be viewed very suspiciously. Are you telling the truth now, or are you lying? What are you doing? I'm just pointing this out. And the original point of this conversation was, why are people no longer as interested in the church as part of their identity today as they were years ago? The country was a very different place then. People were more trusting of authority figures.
Absolutely.
And I really look in my own personal life as a non-practicing Catholic. Really, I look at that, and I try to be a thoughtful man, Joe. I look at that particular time in life as when all the distrust started, you know, and it should have started hundreds of years before, but it didn't, because people wanted to believe their pastor, they wanted to believe their priest, they wanted to believe their president, they wanted to believe the generals in Vietnam, all of those things, and not be played as suckers, because nobody wants to be a sucker. You understand? This is
no, Mike, you and I are exactly on the same wavelength on this. I don't disagree with you at all. You know, we're relative contemporaries.
Sure.
You and I, about the Vietnam War, I lost my best friend, who would have been the world's best neurosurgeon.
Oh.
I lost him in Vietnam.
So many.
And I say to myself, was it worth 53,000 young American dead? Not to speak of the walking wounded, the hundreds of thousands of walking wounded that we have. Of course not. But that's, quite candidly, that's not enough to make me stop being an American. That's not enough to make me stop to say to hell with everything. I'm done.
I did that in my youth, but I grew out of it. I grew out of it. I guess the reason I believe, Joe, I ask your opinion, but I'll just give you mine, and you can give me yours if you want, that people are far more skeptical today of authority figures, church and state, than they were many years ago. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing. I mean, would you agree with that?
I personally think it is an excellent thing because I believe that the more questions that we ask, the better informed that we are, and the better informed that we are, the better we are able to make valid judgments. You can't make a valid judgment without being validly informed. That's why, interestingly enough, and I don't know if we have the time, but interestingly enough, the church has said all along, hey, if you believe in good conscience, that something that the church tells you to do is inherently wrong, you have a duty to disobey.
Yes.
Yeah. Nobody ever stops to think about that. Have you ever seen an organization that tells you if you in good conscience think we're wrong, we tell you you have a duty to follow your own conscience? My goodness.
That's a great line, and we're going to pick up on that line just as soon as we get through the news here. Joe Coleman, give us a call back in 7 or 8 minutes, will you?
Will do.
Thank you, sir. This is AM 1400 KVFD, the voice for Dodge 437. The news is coming up.
Seems like every day, everywhere, practically everyone is connected on their devices. In fact, the average person was connected almost 7 hours a day last year, and 64% of